Hello and welcome, a very warm welcome to episode 67 of the Green Bean podcast. My name is Katie, this little wriggler on my lap is Jack, and we're chatting to you from my studio in the Bannau Brycheiniog National Park in South Wales. However, a lot of what you're going to see in this episode, especially the outdoor footage, is actually from Dartmoor in Devon. That's where I used to live, and at the end of January I went back there for a 10-day holiday, which was delightful. We had the most incredible, cold, crisp, bright, wintry weather. It was gorgeous. So yeah, I couldn't help but take some film in one of our old favourite places to visit and share that with you in this episode. And actually that holiday is the context for what I'm going to be sharing in this episode craft-wise as well. Having a 10-day holiday gave me ample opportunity to do a huge amount of knitting. So for the second episode in a row, I'm chatting almost entirely about knitting. I've done an unbelievable amount, and it's comforting and surprising still to find my desire to knit returned happily after a big chunk of last year, finding myself not wanting to knit at all. So in this episode I'm thoroughly celebrating the fact that my desire to knit has returned full force, and I've got loads of projects to share with you. I've got a finished object, can you spot it? And 2 new cast-ons. One is sadly a bit of a tale of woe, but these things happen, and then another new project to share with you as well. But before we dive fully into that, I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you to everybody who supports these videos over on Patreon. I absolutely love making these videos for you, but I couldn't do it without financial support. It takes me, between filming and editing and creating subtitles and graphic design, it takes me about 3 days to put one of these videos together, and it's hard work, so I couldn't do it without financial support. Over on Patreon I actually share extra videos. All of the videos are available without adverts, and in recent extra episodes I've been chatting about a stained glass window that I've been making for my kitchen, and I've also started a mini series where I go back and revisit my projects of old, both knitting and sewing. I've been pulling them out and asking whatever happened to them. Did they get finished? Did they get worn? Or are they still in a bag? And why are they still in a bag? And thinking about perhaps reclaiming those unloved projects and turning them into something else. So thanks again to everybody who supports my videos over on Patreon. I couldn't do this without you. I'm so glad, so grateful, because I love getting to make these videos and share both my creative projects and my love of the beautiful landscape with you. covered in dog hair as usual. I wonder why. So the first project that I want to share with you is the one that I'm wearing. This is my Regolith Jumper, which is by Kiyomi Burgin, and it's from this book, Cosmology. And I believe I'd only just cast this on in the last episode, so this is some record finishing time for Katie. Obviously helped by the fact that I was on holiday, but also it's a very loose gauge, chunky yarn, and I think altogether it took me just under 3 weeks from start to finish, which is incredible and very satisfying, having gone through such a dry period with knitting. It was so nice to have something on and off the needles in such a short space of time. What can I tell you about this project? I used the recommended yarn, which is Geek from Daruma. It's a blend of wool, polyester and alpaca, and it is like a chain construction yarn, so I think the polyester is a tiny I-cord in the middle of the yarn which traps the wool and alpaca fibres, and it creates this lovely fluffy texture. It's really quite soft and I absolutely loved it. I really enjoyed working with it. It is pilling slightly, but not horribly. I think it's going to be absolutely fine. And I love the pattern as well. I knitted the second size and I followed the instructions almost exactly to the letter. I only made one modification, and it's a tiny one. If I pop the hood up, you can see perhaps the top of the hood is joined with a 3 needle bind off, and the instructions had you do that all the way to the front around this casing for the draw cord, and I didn't want a seam right there in the middle, so I stopped the 3 needle bind off a few stitches early and used grafting to just seamlessly join that little bit around the draw cord. That was my only modification. For the rest of the pattern that I did entirely as I was told, which is rare for me. I normally like to go off piste a little bit, but I was very well behaved with this one and I'm very pleased with how it turned out. There's loads of ease in here. I think I went for about 12 inches of positive ease. It's super comfortable. The sleeve length was exactly right for me. Perhaps in an ideal world I would have added an extra inch, because I'm the kind of person who likes to pull my cuffs over my hands, but altogether I'm very happy with it. It was a very engaging thing to knit as well. I think that's down to this simple lace panel, which is on both the body and the sleeves and the side of the hood. It's worked just over 4 rows. It's a tiny chart and very easy to memorize, so it made it very Moorish to keep knitting, to think just 1 more row. It made it go very quickly. The only part of the project that didn't go quickly was the I-cord, which is massive. It goes all the way around the hood. That was slightly boring, but I knitted that on the 4-hour car journey from South Wales to Devon, so yeah, it wasn't too bad. It was over by the time we got to our holiday destination. So yeah, not too many complaints, just the long I-cord. And actually you can tell I've probably been fidgeting with it the entire time we've been chatting. I really like this feature of the pattern. The pattern was very well written and had lots of thoughtful details. I think my favourite detail is just around this base of the hood. There's a few rows of double knitting. You can probably just see them. It adds just that little bit of sturdiness and reinforcement before you start knitting the hood. And I, as a designer, never would have thought of that. But as a knitter and a garment wearer, I really appreciated that detail. I think it really makes it into a proper, well thought out garment. So I just really enjoyed this knit. I'd recommend the yarn, I'd recommend the pattern, and like any happy, joyful, finished knitting project, I've hardly taken it off since finishing it, and that's always the sign of a successful knit, I think. Before we move on to talking about my next knitting project, I wanted to share something that I discovered whilst unpacking. And when I say the word unpacking, you might wonder, what's Katie talking about? What's Katie unpacking from? Well, not unpacking from my holiday, unpacking from moving house. Yes, it has been almost a year and a half since I moved house. Yes, I am still unpacking. We will not speak of it. Anyway, I came across this in a box full of sketchbooks. This is my knitting journal from, I'm gonna guess, 8 or 9 years ago. So before I started making videos, and just in that stage of my knitting where I was starting to draft or make alterations to patterns or draft my own patterns. So it captures a really interesting stage of my knitting career, and it's also shows you something about the kind of person that I am or aspire to be. There's some very detailed drawings. I've noted down all my calculations. I love that I've added just tiny little illustrations in here. It's a very aspirational knitting sketchbook, and I love the fact that I was able to pull this out of storage, go back in time and look at some of my old projects and find all the information. So I've got information on gauge, I've got information on needle size, I've got information on the yarn and the composition of the yarn, all this kind of information for some self-drafted patterns. And I just looked at it and thought, why don't I do that anymore? And I somehow devolved into, from this very precise, meticulous way of documenting my knits to scribbled notes on a napkin or a piece of scrap paper and then never being able to find it, or not even having all the notes in one notebook but scattered all around the house, all around places, in different project bags, or worst of all, not even having any notes. And if you've watched my videos regularly, my habit of starting projects and then abandoning them for several years, and then when I pull out that project bag, I don't know what needle size I was using, I don't know what gauge I was aiming for, any of that information is gone. So pulling this sketchbook out of storage really inspired me to go back to this way of documenting my knits. I thought, why not? Let's give it a go. By the way, full disclosure, you may think that this is an entire sketchbook full of documented projects. No, I only got this far through. The rest of it is blank pages. That's also my style with sketchbooks. I start them and I don't finish them. And yes, I should probably have resumed my practice on this blank page. Instead, I was on holiday. I had left this at home, so I popped to the local art shop in Devon, picked up a new sketchbook. This one will get used for some other painting projects or something else, but anyway, I felt inspired to resume my practice of keeping an illustrated knitting journal. It also, I thought it would encourage me to do more drawing, which is always a good thing. And I thought, what better project to start my new knitting journal with than my very first hand-spun garment. I'm just using some coloured pencils to add a splash of colour and some detail to this page of my knitting journal that I started while I was on holiday. And you'll see that for my first handspun garment I decided on a vest using my extra chunky yarn that I spun from the Inglenook Fibres Harfoots blend, which is inspired by the Hobbit-like people from the Rings of Power TV show, so it felt only right to turn it into a Hobbit-inspired garment. So I started actually outside my knitting journal with a little sketch of what I thought I wanted this garment to look like. It's basically a short waistcoat with curved front hems, and I wanted it to have a big ribbed collar and I-cord edging with toggle buttons. And I did several swatches first to decide on a stitch pattern. I did a stockinette swatch, I did a garter stitch swatch with a cable, and I tried out the I-cord edging on both of those, and in the end I decided that it was the reverse stockinette stitch with the I-cord edging that I liked the best. Now this yarn was so chunky. Honestly, it's the chunkiest yarn I've ever knitted with, let alone the chunkiest yarn I've ever spun. It was kind of like knitting with snakes. It was really so thick. I worked on 7mm needles and my gauge was something like 12 stitches, maybe even 10 stitches in 10 centimetres. Anyway, all of that means that it knitted up in about 5 minutes, and oh, careful because I've got needles attached. In fact, I'm going to pull the needle out because, as you'll see, the whole thing is going to get frogged. But here we have the best part of a knitted waistcoat. In fact, I'm going to pop it on and show you as best I can. It fits nicely over this jumper. It fits nicely all together. I'm absolutely thrilled with it. It looks brilliant. What's the downside then? The downside is, unfortunately, I am out of yarn, and this is a problem that I guess you run into with handspun. There's nothing I can do. The fibre was a limited edition. I can't possibly get any more. Even if I could, I wouldn't necessarily be able to replicate the way that I spun it to get an exact match. So what have I done to try and mitigate this disaster? I've already frogged an inch off the bottom of the waistcoat to make it shorter. And then I thought, okay, well, I have to decide between my I-cord edging and my big collar, and I thought I could sacrifice the collar because the collar is a luxury, whereas the I-cord, you can see the front of the waistcoat is really rolling, so it needs an edging. The I-cord is non-negotiable, that has to happen. And as you'll see on the back, I did actually make a good start on the I-cord edging, and I got about this far before it became abundantly clear. Even if I unravelled my swatches, I would not have enough yarn to do the I-cord edging. Never mind the collar. There isn't even enough to do a basic edge around this thing, and it can't really get any shorter because it's already a micro waistcoat. So yeah, That's all I have to say. It's very frustrating because it would have been so joyful to come home from a holiday with a second finished garment, and it felt like such a joy and a celebration to knit with my beautiful handspun for the first time. I'm so in awe of this fabric that it creates. The yarn itself was a little bit slubby and uneven, but by the time I plied the singles and then knitted it, it really makes this very beautiful fabric. I'm showing you the stockinette side, which I like just as much, if not more, than the reverse stockinette side. Yeah, it's a sad story, but you know, the amazing thing about knitting is that nothing is ever a complete disaster. It's one of the only crafts where you can make and unmake things without permanent changes to your material in most cases. So nothing is irretrievable, which is a positive. What have I decided to do? Well, I think the only thing I can do at this point is frog the back and spin a different yarn in a contrasting colour for the back panel. Almost like, imagine you have like a tweed waistcoat that you wear with a suit. That's going to have a silk panel at the back in a contrasting colour. So in a way it's true to the spirit of the garment to have a different colour in the back. The good news about that decision is that if I frog the entire back of the waistcoat, I will definitely have enough yarn to do my I-cord all the way around the edge and my joyful big collar that I initially wanted. So from the front, eventually it will look exactly like my sketch. It will just have a surprise in the back. It's not exactly what I wanted, but it's also not the end of the world. It is going to have to wait because I do not even have a colour in mind, let alone a fibre in mind to make this new yarn that I'm imagining for the back panel. I think ideally I would like it to be a darker green, but it was a very particular blend. This fibre was from Inglenook Fibres. It was made from merino, Manx, silk and flax. So I either try and find something of a similar kind of blend in the right colour that I'm imagining, or I'm going to have to blend it myself. And I have a drum carder, but it sounds a lot like hard work to me, especially putting silk through the drum carder. I've never done it, but I imagine that silk is quite hard work because it's really long, strong fibres. So all of that is to say, this beloved project is going to get put to one side for the time being, because until I find that fibre and then spin that fibre, I can't move the project forward. So as joyful as it has been, it's going to have a little rest until I can find the perfect fibre to make the back panel. to cheer myself up after the slight frustration with my waistcoat project, it only felt right to cast on another project with my Handspun. And I'm sure if you've watched my videos recently, you'll recognise this Handspun. This was in fact my first garment quantity spin. It was a limited edition fibre from John Arbon Textiles called Bannau, although having finished my spin and skeined it up, I am going to argue that it looks a bit more like a tawny owl than a barn owl, but nonetheless I'm absolutely thrilled with how this yarn came out. I spun it into a 3-ply. It's very round, arguably slightly overplied, but I'm not going to complain about that too much because, as you'll see, it's lent itself very well to the project I've started. I've only got one skein left as a skein of my 3 because I've been going great guns with the knitting. I have already finished the front of a jumper. Before we get into too much detail on that, actually, where are they? Here. I wanted to show you my swatches and talk about what I decided to do. So I started, as always do, with a lovely stockinette swatch, and I really love this fabric. The gauge is kind of slightly loose and drapey, which is perfect for this fibre. It's got a little bit of Wensleydale in it, so it's nice and drapey. And I mean, it's gorgeous, but it does that thing that handspun and sometimes hand dyed does, where it makes slight lines of colour across the fabric. And I'm not averse to that, but actually, I'm lying. I am averse to that. I felt like in the plain stockinette it really accentuated that, and I didn't want that to be really noticeable. I thought if I knitted a whole garment in plain stockinette, that striping would be really in your face. So actually I counted that already in the spinning because I spun up a contrasting colour. When I did the 3-ply, I had a little bit of singles left over on one bobbin, and rather than chain plying it into some additional yarn, I plied that one single with 2 strands of 100% Zwartbles, which is a lovely, lovely dark brown. It makes a contrasting colour, and I had a few plays around with a stripe sequence, and I eventually settled on this swatch, which alternates stripes of the light and dark and some texture in there. It's all knit and purl texture, mostly ridges of garter stitch and a little bit of broken rib in the middle, and I love how this shows off the characteristics of the yarn. Because it's got quite a high twist, it really shows the definition of those stitches, but also I love how it shows off the variation of colour without being really obviously striped. You can see that it's hand spun, you can see that there's lots of different colours in there, but it's not really in your face, and I am absolutely thrilled with how this jumper is looking. The whole fabric is a delight to me. I'm so pleased. I couldn't be more pleased with how this is turning out. I am having slight yarn anxiety, but I've preempted that with the way that I'm constructing the jumper. So this is my front piece finished. If I wriggle around on the floor here, I'm well on the way with my back piece, and I'm not worried about yarn quantity for the back. I'm definitely going to have a front and back of a jumper. Once I've finished those, I plan to block them and knit the neckband, because actually the contrast colour is the one I'm most worried about. This is all I have. So I will knit the neckband first, and then I will split any remaining yarn that I have in half, both main colour and contrasting colour, and I will knit the sleeves from the top down, and the sleeves will just have to be as long as the sleeves will be. It might be that they get to full length, although my instinct at this point tells me they probably won't. They're probably only going to get to 3/4 length, which is fine. You know, I'm pushing my sleeves up when I'm working anyway, and if it's cold I can always wear a long sleeve top underneath, so it wouldn't be the end of the world. It certainly wouldn't be as disastrous as my waistcoat, but it has taught me a lesson, which is, well, several lessons. One lesson is that my handspun is quite dense, and so I need more yardage than I might need of commercial yarn for a garment. The second lesson is just buy more fibre, Katie. Buy more fibre than you think you need. I think when I had been purchasing garment quantities of fibre, I was purchasing by weight and buying a similar weight to the weight of yarn I would buy for a garment. Obviously, I'm losing some because the yarn I'm spinning is a little bit more dense, and I'm losing some because there's little bits of leftover singles here and there. There was still some leftover of the Bannau singles after I made this contrasting colour, which I chain plied, and it turned out a slightly different texture, a different looking yarn than the other one, so I won't be using that in the garment. It's all a lesson, it's all a learning curve. It's amazing to me that I've only been spinning a couple of years, and here I am holding up the best part of an entire garment that I've made for myself. Not only knitted past every stitch through my fingers, but I've passed every inch of this fibre through my fingers. This is a jumper that I've made from fluff. It's amazing. I'm so proud of myself, and to see that skill developing over years, because it has been years. It's been a slow process. This spin took me a long time. I only really spin 15 minutes a day, if that. I don't always manage it every day, so it's been a very slow process, but such a joyful one. And yeah, I can just imagine the joy of putting on a garment that I've made completely from scratch. It could only be more from scratch if I'd started with raw fleece, and let's be honest, that project is inevitable, but I'm putting that quite far in the future for now. But one day that's certainly something I would love to do. For now, I'm focusing on finishing this, my very first handspun garment. I thought the waistcoat was going to take that prize, but no, it's going to be this Tawny Owl jumper. I know someone's going to ask if there was a pattern. No, there wasn't. I'm drafting this from scratch based on my measurements, and I'm taking the measurements from this jumper, although I've gone slightly smaller in the interest of trying to maximise the yarn that I have. So there's no pattern, I'm just making it up as I go along. Now you may ask, what does this mean for my knitting journal if I've abandoned my waistcoat project in an unfinished state and moved on to another project? Well, much as it pained me, I had to leave a gap, and yeah, that was frustrating, but also, you know, what's the point of a knitting journal if it's not documenting the actual process that I'm going through? And the actual process of my knitting involves a lot of false starts, dead ends, froggings, disasters. These things happen. It would be very upsetting, probably for you as viewers, to hear me sit here and talk about endless projects that I've seen through from beginning to end without mishap. That would be very dull. So yes, I'm going to be honest in my knitting journal, and I've left a gap. I left a gap saying to be continued. And yeah, okay, that page might not be enough page for me to continue the rest of that project. I might need to leave a little note and continue it further on in the book, but I wasn't going to let that stop me continuing with my journal, because it was such a joyful thing to return to the journaling practice. I thought, I can't stop at this first hurdle, so I just turned over the page and started the page for my Bannau jumper as though nothing had happened, because really this is going to happen. It won't be the first project, and in fact I wouldn't be surprised if we run into some kind of hurdle with the Bannau project further down the line. It's a rare knitting project that progresses smoothly from beginning to end without hitch. It does happen, like this jumper that I'm wearing, but that's very much the exception rather than the norm. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of The Green Bean. I hope you've enjoyed spending a bit of time both here with me in my studio and back on beautiful Dartmoor. It was lovely to be able to take you with me back to one of my favourite places in the world and share it with you again. And to be able to have a multitude of knitting projects to share with you as well. I am hoping over the coming episodes to have some other crafts as well. I'm getting back into my studio with some drawing now that I've had my holiday and my winter break. I'm hoping that there'll be some sewing on the table again soon, and I do already have another spinning project on the go as well. So there are other things going on here. There was just so much knitting after my holiday that it was enough to fill an episode all by itself. Nonetheless, I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you for choosing to spend some of your precious time with me, and I hope whatever projects you're working on, that they're progressing smoothly. I will see you soon. Thanks again. Bye.